Okay, so we're in the middle of Cherev Nokomis Nekambris, the book by Rabbi Breslau, who is writing to respond to the Book of the Hamburg Bezdin, and here he's responding regarding prayer in other languages. Obviously the whole thing, this whole polemical back and forth, this whole argument of 1819, 1820 is launched by the proposed building of the Hamburg Temple, and one of the things they want to do is have prayer in German, and so that's what this is revolving around here. Now he of course has argued, based on the Shulchan Aruch and the commentaries, there's nothing wrong with prayer in another language, which is true. The question is, what does that apply to? Does that apply to a community? Does it apply to an individual? Now, if you remember, actually, we saw that in the Shulchan Aruch, in the codes of Jewish law, it seemed actually that it was more intuitive, or was more legal to have a community pray in the vernacular, whereas an individual should pray in Hebrew, because the power of the individual to kind of lift the prayers above is not as strong. So the question is, when the rabbis of the Hamburg Bezdin, what's their argument? And so their argument is going to, again, have to be a more meta argument, because obviously from the black and white words of the Shulchan Aruch, it's hard to argue that you can't pray in another language. And so he quotes about 8 letters in the Hamburg Bezdin book that he's arguing against. And we're up to the third one, which is the rabbi of Breslau. I'll show you that. And here's what Rabbi Breslau has argued. This is Harav Agonah B'Fursim. There's a letter to the Hamburg Bezdin. It's part of the book Eile Divrei Habris, from Rabbi Abraham Nero, the head of the Bezdin of Breslau, and he's writing it to the Bezdin of Hamburg. And he says, I got your letter dated the 20th of Kislev, got it last week, and and you have asked me to respond regarding B'davar ha'hitchadshut b'kihilatchem, about this new thing that has come up in your, this novelty that has come up in your kihila. And we know how bad it is. Ra'ada achazatenu. Asher gam b'Hamburg asher me'az hayta adei kihilat Yisrael. He says, what an irony that in Hamburg this is happening. That's such a place of traditional kihilot, traditional congregations. That precisely there, this woe has flowered. Woe is to us that in our day this has happened. So obviously they see this not as just a halachic question. Obviously this is much bigger for, seeing a much bigger picture here. That these people have come to legeshet al hakodesh, to touch and defile the holy, to break through boundaries, to change the holy prayers, which the men of the Great Assembly and our rabbis have established, which are the words of God, the word of the living God. And then he says, it says in there, right? So we wonder, what's he going to do, right? Because we know the Gemara says he could pray in other languages. Here's what he does. He says, it says in the Gemara in Brachot, quotes a different Gemara, that the rabbis wanted to compose a 19th blessing, right? There were 18 blessings in the Amidah. We still call it the Shemona Esrei, 18 blessings, but if you count it, it's 19 blessings. Why? Because in the time of the Talmud, they added a 19th blessing, and that was V'lamal Shinim, a blessing against the murmurers, against the reporters. There were Jews who were on the side of the government, who were probably reporting Jews to the Romans in an illegitimate way, just to get Jews in trouble, to show, how much they associated with the Muslim time, the Mishnah, how much they associated with the government, and they were going against the Jews, sort of like Hellenism and the struggle in time of Cham. They wanted to, the rabbis of the Mishnah wanted to make this 19th blessing, and they couldn't do it. They didn't feel worthy until Shmuel HaKatan, Samuel the Small, that was his name, until he came forward and he was able to compose it. So he says basically, why couldn't the rabbis just compose a 19th blessing? What's the big deal? So he says it must be that prayer is resonating with very mystical, very high things, and not everybody can just change prayer, compose prayer. And we find many other places in the Talmud where it talks about this idea. Everybody knows. Everybody knows that it's forbidden to change anything from the customs of our ancestors, from Mishnah or from the Mishnah, or to make our prayers shorter, or our blessings to change them, or to change Psukei de Zimra, the way that we have the structured earlier parts of prayer before the Baruch Hu. And if you change, the structure of the prayer service, you're called Poresh Midarkei Tzibur, somebody who separates themselves from the way of the tradition, way of the community. And he says, right, he doesn't say you can't pray in another language, because you clearly can pray in another language. What he says is it's forbidden, therefore, to fix permanently as a structured communal way prayer in another language. Says in all the diaspora, they pray in all the Jewish communities in the whole world. They pray in Hebrew. So therefore, this is part of the concept of lotit godudu. There is a general halachic principle that Jews should not be doing different kinds of things. It shouldn't look like the Jews are different groups. This comes up most well known in the question of wearing tefillin on Chol HaMoed. That in the synagogue, the Shulchan Aruch says you shouldn't have a group of people wearing tefillin on Chol HaMoed and a group of people not wearing tefillin on Chol HaMoed. Every synagogue should everybody should wear it, or everybody shouldn't wear it. Now, in our times, many shuls actually, it has become precisely that. But the reason given that everybody should do the same thing is this: lo titgo to do, lo tia agudot agudot. You shouldn't be different. You shouldn't look like you're more than one group. You should look like the Jews are unified. And therefore, for Jews not to pray in Hebrew in a fixed way as a congregation, he's saying, is a violation of that, right? So it's trying to figure out, basically he knows this is a problem for many reasons, and they need to bring some material proof for that. Nobody's ever done this before. Now he says, and the reason, I think what he means here is the reason they want to do it is we know why. He says the reason they want to do it, I think what he's saying here is that the reason they want to do it is not, it's not with pure intention. We know why they're trying to do it, and there's probably more reasons, he says, that we don't know. The Yeruim, not sure what this acronym is, but this is it's a violation, as it says in our holy books. All of this is separating yourself from the way of the congregation. He might mean here that the reasons for prayer, or the reasons that our prayer is structured the way it is hidden. Not sure exactly what he means by that line. Then he says, and this concept of using an organ on Shabbos through a non-Jew. Now remember, it's interesting, they're not even talking about, they're sort of assuming that they're not addressing organ on weekday. We have mentioned this, that organ on weekday, maybe they are permitting. It's a little hard to know. But organ on Shabbos, they say, even through a non-Jew is definitely forbidden, even though, again, in Shulchan Aruch, there are ways to do that. Ma'od, and he says we have to get up and publicly talk about these forbidden, things. In order to, why do we have to talk about this publicly? Why do we have to decry this new movement? in order to remove the stumbling blocks from before the Jews. My brethren, ashreichem asher chalkechem. We are so happy. We should be so joyous with our lot. You are blessed by God. We must fight the war of God and pray to God that God will have mercy upon us and that they will listen. This new group, it means that they will listen to the voice of their teachers, and we will teach those who are making a mistake, and they will, yivatal atzatam, they will get rid of this new idea. They'll stop trying to do this, and be kupar avonam, and they will atone for their sins, and that will be an honor for all of us. Signs of the one who waits for redemption, tough Kofine test, 1819. Okay. So it's interesting. I mean, it's in the same vein as everything that's written here, and again, you have sort of the Shulchan Aruch approach of just the text, on the part of Rabbi Breslau, and you have kind of the meta approach of the Hamburg Bezdin and those who are supporting them, right? Sort of like when the Chassam Sofer famously said, "Chadash asur min haTorah," anything new is forbidden from the Torah. Is that true? It's not really true, but there's a lot more at stake here. And now maybe the reformers feel they're also arguing for the future of the Jewish people. I'm sure they are. I don't think they're trying to be. I don't think they have an ulterior motive. I'm sure they feel that modernization is the best thing for the Jewish people. Okay, then he quotes another one, Daf Chaf Zion. Let's see that he's sort of writing against. There we go. And this is from. This is a letter from Rabbi Akiva Eger. That we know his name well. Very, very famous halachist, and he's the head of the Kehillah of Posen. And he's writing it to the rabbis of Hamburg. And he says, I'm addressing this new group that wants to make their own prayers. They want to get rid of Birchot HaShachar. They want to get rid of the morning prayer, the morning blessings. They want to shorten Psukei de Zimra. They want to shorten the Psalms. They just want to say Mizmor and Hallelu. They don't want to say Tehillah David. So they really want to shorten Psukei de Zimra. And you're supposed to say Ashrei 3 times a day. And it sounds like they want to skip Ashrei, or at least not say it 3 times a day. And it says in the Talmud that if you say Ashrei 3 times a day, you will be blessed with the world to come. So that's what they want to do. And they don't want to mention the building of Jerusalem and the ingathering of the exiles. Now that's pretty gutsy. I mean, in 1819, the very beginning of reform, you're talking about a synagogue where they have a mechitza. They want to take out references to the rebuilding of Jerusalem. I mean, that is pretty radical, right? So that's different. I mean, so we have to realize that if this is really the case, that that's what they want to do, so this is different than, right? Rabbi Breslau is writing about, he's bringing proofs that you can pray in another language. Well, that's very different than, cutting out prayers, and especially cutting out or changing the language of changing thematic language that's going to change the whole gist of certain blessings in the Amidah. And that's a much more radical thing. And clearly, that's already part of the, remember, even before the Hamburg temple is built, there's already a minyan going on for 10 years in Berlin of reformers. So, and there's already the Enlightenment's been going on for 70 years. And he says, people who want to do this, they obviously are not too committed, probably don't put on tefillin, he says. They violate the Shabbos. How are they going to know how to put on tefillin? How are they going to know how to even make tefillin? if they don't have a tradition? And how will they know where to put it? They're cutting themselves off from the tradition. Without the tradition, you have no idea how to keep Judaism. The only way that we know anything, he says, about how to do Judaism is from our tradition. And that's the basis of our faith. That's why we have an oral tradition. And if you give up that oral tradition and you say, we're only following the written tradition, or we're kind of making our own, you're lost. And if you don't believe in an oral tradition that we're bound to it, he says you're not Bikoros, you're a heretic. And he proves that from the Rambam. And then he says they want to mitoch sidur hanidfas b'shinei. He says we need to forbid praying from a siddur that has changes, and we need to forbid changing any nusach, any language of the siddur that we don't know that's already established. You can pray Sfarad Ashkenaz with it, but you can't make a new one. And he quotes the Magen Avram, right, who Rabbi Breslau is quoting to show that you can pray in other languages, quoting the Magen Avram, that you can't change the structure of the prayer. And he says, besides that, you should not pray in another language in a fixed way in a congregation, except in Hebrew. He says, okay, now, even though the law is, I know that the law is, he says, you can pray in any language. He says, that's only once in a while. But to fix it in a synagogue as the permanent language of prayer for a congregation, he says that's forbidden. And God forbid to do that. The rabbis of the Great Assembly have already established our prayer service. They don't know Hebrew. That's pretty bad. So you're going to change the language because they don't understand Hebrew? Teach them Hebrew. Right, again, these are it's like they're talking opposite each other because they're working phones.
What I find kind of strange in that paragraph is his reference to the things were set in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. I mean, nobody will argue that tefillah was set in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu.
No,
it's the third line in that paragraph. I mean, if he would have said,
Dor
Ezra, something that would have made would have given me more faith in his argument if he was right. Yeah, Vatenu Dor on Moshe Rabbeinu.
It's funny that it says Dor ad Moshe.
Right,
and it goes back all the way. It goes back all the way to Moshe.
No tefillot as we know them were set time of Moshe Rabbeinu.
But I think there is it, right? There is a sense of that. I mean, you're right technically, but I bet you ask the average Orthodox. I bet you ask the average, I don't know, Haredi Jew. Did the Anshe Knesset Gedolah write it new? How did Moshe pray to God? I think they'll have no doubt that Moshe prayed exactly the way we pray.
They will say that Moshe said Ashrei also? I mean, that's ridiculous.
I think absolutely they will. I mean, Chazal say things like this, right? Chazal say, even Mikra Megillah Moshe had, right? That everything comes from Sinai. In other words, you're right, obviously, on some halachic level, of course, the structure of prayer is the Rabbanan. The Rambam certainly says that. We definitely believe it was composed. But there's a sense here. In other words, I think that's the thing. That's what they're drawing on here, is this sense of tradition, is this sense. I think there is an idea that everything we have, all of Torah Sheba'al Peh, goes all the way back to Moshe. That's why I think he draws on this idea of tefillin first, right? In other words, he's saying everything goes all the way back. Without it, you have no Judaism. No, I mean, of course, you're right. It doesn't really come from Moshe. Moshe didn't really pray the Amidah the way we have it. It's very clear that the Anshe, Knesset Gedolah, or later it was composed. And prayer has probably morphed a lot over time, right? It's but when it comes to making an argument, because in other words, that's the thing, right? The Reform are arguing details. The Orthodox are arguing big picture. That's really what's happening. But they need to write, they need some, you can't just say, this is a very bad idea. You have to have something to back it up. No, of course, you're right. It doesn't go all the way back to Moshe. but it's like, that's what I mean. They're sort of talking across each other. They're just so not on the same page. You know, and again, I'm sure they both mean well, but it's the struggle between, you know, I mean, we still have it today, you know, is doing something new and staying with the times, you know, is that going to keep Jews connected? Or no, that's going to wear away at the tradition. You know, of course, you're right. It doesn't go back to Moshe, and he's saying it does. That's a very good point. I'm glad he pointed it out. This would be interesting to look at the language of the other, you know, the other 4 or 5 writers that he quotes and see, do they use the same idea? They do. One thing that does keep coming up is this sort of mystical idea that prayer is mystical and we don't get the structure of the words, and we can't do it because we just don't get it. We don't know what it really, that comes up a lot. This idea that, you know, you just can't change anything comes up a lot, that they knew better than us. I mean, that's still the arguments today. But that's a good point. In other words, we should keep our eyes open for that also. And is there this kind of historical restructuring? Is that a common argument or not? I think that's a very good point. So, you know, you have to sort of use what you can. All right, everybody's trying to preserve the Jewish people. Okay, have a good day.
Thank you.